All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to dive deep into the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight.
Oh, yeah. This one had everyone talking.
Definitely a lot to unpack with this one. We've got some recent articles about the aftermath, the money, and all the controversy. So, are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so first off, the result itself was a huge surprise. Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned boxer, beat Mike Tyson, the legend, by unanimous decision. And just for anyone who may not be super familiar with boxing terms, a unanimous decision means all three judges scored the fight for Paul.
Yeah, a
Really?
total upset.
Yeah.
And to make things even more interesting, Paul said after the fight that he held back on purpose. He chose not to knock Tyson out. He said it was out of respect for the former champ.
Well, I was shocked when I heard that. I mean, it's like, on the one hand, it's definitely respectful, but it also left a lot of fans confused. Some people were disappointed, others thought it was good sportsmanship, and then there were those who started questioning if the fight was even real. What was your first reaction?
Honestly, it was kind of mixed feelings. I see where Paul's coming from, wanting to be respectful,
Right.
especially to an older fighter like Mike Tyson. But it also kind of makes you wonder, was the fight actually a real competition or was it just for show?
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's not forget about the money. This fight was a massive payday for both fighters, especially for Paul.
Oh, absolutely. Reports are saying that Tyson walked away with a guaranteed $20 million and Paul could have earned something like $40 million with bonuses.
$40 million. Wow. Do you remember how Paul kept talking about key performance indicators before the fight and how they were tied to his bonuses? Makes me wonder if maybe holding back to keep the fight going longer was one of those indicators. What do you think? Could this set a bad example, manipulating fights for more money in these celebrity boxing matches? It's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really important point. It raises some serious questions about what's really motivating these kinds of fights.
Yeah, speaking of questionable motives, there's been a ton of controversy surrounding this fight. A lot of fans are straight up calling it rigged and feeling cheated.
Yeah, I get why they feel that way. Paul admitting he didn't go all out just adds fuel to the fire. And then you have Eddie Hearn, the boxing promoter, calling it horrible to watch and unnecessary.
Yeah, he did not hold back. It seems like there was already some tension even before the fight happened. Remember that awkward moment at the press conference when a reporter questioned Paul about his choice of opponents?
Oh yeah, that press conference was tense. It definitely seems like Paul has a lot of critics who don't see him as a real boxer.
Critics aside, there is one thing that happened after the fight that didn't get much attention: the suspensions. Both fighters were immediately suspended, which I think is pretty standard in Texas after a fight, right?
Yeah, that's normal in Texas. The suspension depends on how many rounds they fought, 3 days for each round. So nothing unusual there, and they can appeal it if they want. But this could definitely mess with their schedules and any upcoming fight negotiations.
Okay, so to recap, we have Jake Paul, the surprise winner, a giant pile of money for both fighters, and a whole lot of controversy. But what really stood out to me was the fight itself. I want to understand how Paul actually managed to win against someone like Tyson, even if he was holding back.
Good point. Let's break down the fight, look at their strategies, and try to figure out how Paul, the underdog, was able to dominate in the ring.
Let's do that.
So let's break down the fight itself, instead of just focusing on the result and all the drama.
Uh,
I think it's important to look at how the fight actually went down.
yeah, I agree. Let's get into the details. What surprised you the most about Paul's performance?
What really stood out to me was his composure and how well he controlled the ring. He set the pace, kept his distance from Tyson, and never seemed intimidated by Tyson's power.
So even though he didn't go for the knockout, he was still in control the whole time.
Oh yeah, for sure. He landed the better punches, used his reach to his advantage, and honestly, he showed a surprisingly mature understanding of boxing.
What about Tyson's performance? I mean, he's obviously not the fighter he used to be, but what did you think of his strategy?
Well, Tyson still got that aggression and power, even in his age. But he looked a little slower, and he had trouble closing the distance with Paul because Paul was moving so well.
Sounds like Paul's younger age and agility really helped him win.
Definitely. I think this fight brings up an interesting question about younger fighters going up against these older veterans. Like, at what point does a boxer's legacy become more important than their physical abilities?
That is a really interesting question, and it makes you think about how much boxing is changing right now. We've got YouTube stars fighting legends, fights being shown on streaming platforms, and a whole new generation of fans watching it. It's a completely different world than when Tyson was on top back in the 80s and 90s.
It really is. This fight is the perfect example of how the lines between entertainment and sports are getting blurred. It was even broadcast on Netflix, a platform you don't usually associate with live sports, and that means it reached a way bigger audience than just boxing fans.
And Jake Paul is really good at using that to his advantage. He knows how to build hype, create a story, and get people's attention in this new media world.
He's a smart marketer and a talented showman, for sure. But the big question is, can he move past that showmanship and actually be seen as a real boxer by the people who really know the sport?
Seems like a lot of the old school boxing people are pushing back. Critics like Eddie Hearn say Paul needs to fight top-ranked guys in his weight class to prove himself. They see these big spectacle fights as distractions from what boxing is really about.
There's definitely a clash happening between the old way and the new way of doing things in boxing. But what does it even mean to be a real boxer in this new era? Is it all about skill and your record, or is it also about where you came from, the respect to the boxing community, and following the traditional rules?
It's like there are two different sets of rules, one for traditional boxers and one for people who come into the sport in these new non-traditional ways.
That's a good way to put it. And it's not just about Paul. We're seeing more and more athletes and celebrities from other fields stepping into the ring, which makes those lines even blurrier.
And you can't ignore the money either. These celebrity boxing matches are making a ton of money, bringing in new fans, and maybe even attracting new talent and investment into boxing.
The money is definitely there. For promoters, these events are like a gold mine. They offer this unique mix of athleticism, drama, and celebrity appeal that attracts both casual viewers and hardcore fans. But the question is, can this model last in the long run?
That's the big question. Will this whole thing make boxing better, or will it cheapen it? Will it lead to less focus on skill and competition, or will it bring some much-needed excitement and money to a sport that's trying to stay relevant in the modern world?
It's a tough one. On the one hand, these events could bring new life to boxing, bring in new fans, and create financial opportunities. But on the other hand, if the focus shifts too much toward the spectacle and away from the actual athletic competition, it could turn off the traditional fans and hurt the integrity of the sport.
And what about Mike Tyson? Where does he fit into all of this? He's a legend who's now taking part in events that some people see as hurting the sport he used to dominate. It's a complicated situation for his legacy.
It really is. And it makes you wonder what his motivations are. Is it about the money, wanting to stay relevant, or is it something else entirely?
Yeah.
And for Jake Paul, is it about proving he's a real boxer, building his brand, or shaking up the whole sport?
This fight has really opened up a ton of questions about the future of boxing, the role of celebrity, and what athletic achievement even means.
And those questions are just going to get bigger as this trend continues.
You mentioned earlier that fans have had pretty mixed reactions to this fight. Let's talk more about that. What are people saying, and why are the opinions so divided?
Yeah, it seems like everyone has a strong opinion about this fight. Some feel totally ripped off. Others are praising Paul for being respectful to Tyson, and then some are just lost. So why are people reacting so strongly? Well, it goes beyond just the fight itself. It kind of makes us think about what's important to us in sports, the influence of celebrities and how the power dynamics are shifting in boxing.
So how are all these different opinions shaping the way people see this fight?
It's interesting to see how the media is handling it. Some are really focused on the controversy and pushing the whole rigged fight angle, while others are emphasizing the money and the entertainment aspect of it. I think it shows that the way we interpret an event often depends on our own perspective.
Yeah, and with social media blowing up all these different opinions, it can be hard for a listener to cut through all that noise and figure out what to believe. What should they keep in mind as they try to make sense of it all?
That's a great point. I think there are a few key things to remember. First, this fight is kind of like a sign of a bigger change happening. It shows how celebrity boxing is growing and what that means for the sport's identity. It's about these lines blurring between entertainment and sport, the changing way fans connect, and the financial reasons behind these events.
So it's not just about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. It's about a bigger shift taking place in boxing and probably in other sports too.
Exactly. The second thing to remember is to pay attention to all the different narratives being thrown around the rigged versus respectful. Debate, the argument about whether someone is a legitimate boxer or an entertainer, the financial impact on both fighters and the sport itself. Engage with all these viewpoints, even if you don't agree. Challenge your own ideas and try to see the different sides of the story.
So basically, don't just follow the crowd. Take the time to understand all the angles and form your own opinion.
Exactly. And lastly, think about what this all means in the long run. Will this fight be a one-time thing, or will it change boxing forever? How will it affect the future of the sport? Will it lead to more crossover events, bring in new fans and investment, or will it end up hurting the sport's core values and integrity?
These are questions that we'll only see answered over time. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with one final thought, something to really chew on.
Sounds good.
Considering all the different reactions, the huge amount of money involved, and Jake Paul's ambition to keep fighting even bigger names in boxing, do you think this event will ultimately make the sport better, or will it hurt its credibility?
That's a tough one. It's a question that goes deeper than just wins and losses.
Yeah.
It's about the very essence of boxing. And it's something we'll all be thinking about as this new era plays out.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another exciting topic and more insights to explore. Until then, keep searching, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.